Thank you. It's good to be here. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. I almost wanted to call it a lecture, but that has such a negative connotation. The presentation I'm giving today is on the exhibition 30 Americans, and you're going to have to look at this television screen over here. So for those of you kind of seated in the wrong direction, if you can kind of turn around, you'll get to, you'll enjoy it much better than just sort of listening to me. You'll get to see some of the images. The exhibition opens to our members this evening and opens to the public tomorrow and runs, as you can see, through the end of June. And I just want to make the point now that the exhibition is free to the public. And that was very important to us when we brought the show here, was we wanted to break down any financial barriers to visitors coming to see the exhibition. And that's not just for this exhibition, but the majority of traveling exhibitions that we bring to the Arkansas Arts Center are free to the public, as is our permanent collection, always free to the public. Okay, so it's part of the service to the community is that we have beautiful works of art on view all the time for people to enjoy. So the exhibition, 30 Americans, comes from the Rubell Family Collection, and here's a picture of Donald and Mira Rubell. They began collecting contemporary art at an early age. He was in medical school. He eventually became a gynecologist in New York. And they had roughly at the time, probably about $100 a month to spend on art. So what they did was they traveled around New York, visited galleries, got to know artists, got to know young artists, and with their limited means started acquiring works that spoke to them. That meant something, that were provocative. That's kind of a hallmark of their collection. To the point where they eventually accumulated over 5,000 works of art and are one of the leading collectors of modern contemporary art in the world. It's interesting when you hear them speak about kind of how they started, because it's very reminiscent of another pair of New York collectors, the Vogels. I don't know if any of you know Dorothy and Herbert Vogel. She was a librarian and he was a postal worker. And with their limited means and their little one-room apartment in New York, they traveled to galleries and met with artists and slowly started to purchase work until they put together thousands of works, which they eventually gave to the United States. They selected one institution in each of the 50 states and gave 50 works to each of those institutions. And for Arkansas, we were the lucky recipient of those contemporary works. So in the same vein, you have the Rubells, who started out with modest means, but really being diligent, really visiting galleries and getting to know artists and not buying right away. And what they'll tell you is they looked and looked and looked and looked, and eventually you have to pull the trigger and buy the first one. And don't be afraid that you're going to make a mistake. You just have to buy the first piece and then move on. And in fact, they did. Eventually, their financial situation turned when Donald Rubell's brother passed away and left them an extraordinary amount of money. And you may know his brother, Steve Rubell, who was the famous owner and operator of Studio 54, who was also a hotelier, and he owned a number of hotels in Miami. So when he passed away, he left his entire fortune and all the hotels to his brother. And that then gave them the means to collect on a very rapid and massive scale. And what they ended up doing with this collection is they opened their own museum. And this is the Rubell Family Collection in the lower right, and there's an image of it in the upper left, in an area of Miami that was at the time a less than desirable area to be in. Since they opened their institution, which was more than a decade ago, that has revitalized that region. And in fact, that building is a former DEA drug warehouse. So they repurposed that building, which is not so great looking from the outside, but they rehabbed it on the inside, and now it houses this beautiful collection, which spans largely American contemporary art. As they were collecting and visiting with different artists, they were talking to some young, current African-American artists and talking to them about who their influences are. And that's a common opening question when you're talking to an artist. Like, okay, where do you get your influences? Who do you look at? Who do you admire? What do you like? What kind of input do you look for? And they kept hearing some of the same names coming up, like Robert Colescott and Carol Walker, and now just David Simmons. And these were artists that they already had in their collection. So they thought, well, we already have these artists, and now we're collecting this next generation of artists, so maybe what we should do is put together an exhibition that kind of shows a little bit of that linkage between that first generation and the second generation of artists in the 20th century. And so they put on an exhibition of 200. So 200 works by African-American artists in their 45,000 square foot institution to rave reviews. So much so that other institutions came calling and said, we'd like to have that here. Well, not everybody can turn over 45,000 square feet to an exhibition. We certainly can't. And as it is, we have it in about 12,000 square feet, which is the largest exhibition I can recall us having in the institution, meaning it takes over our traveling exhibition space plus part of our permanent exhibition space. So when you go in to see the exhibition, it is virtually the entirety of the Arkansas Arts Center. And because of that, we couldn't take, obviously, all 200, right? So we have 42 works by 30 artists. The title of the exhibition, 30 Americans, that title is very purposeful. Nowhere in the title do you get the understanding that these are contemporary African-American artists. It just says 30 Americans, could be anybody. And when you read the essays in the catalog, and this is the catalog, the author talks about the reason for selecting the title in that being an American is a point of fact. You pull out your passport and it says, look, I'm American or I'm Canadian or whatever. Racial identity is far more complex. And that's up to each individual person to identify themselves. And so they didn't want to attach that to the title for this exhibition. And so they left that removed and just called the exhibition 30 Americans, Rubell Family Collection is the subtitle. But in the show, we have artists like Robert Colescott. So he's one of those artists that this younger generation was looking to. And in fact, a few of the artists talk about the fact that Colescott, even though his subjects or his themes are kind of hard-hitting, that he's able to inject humor into what would otherwise be a theme of racial discrimination. And in fact, this is called Sunset on the Bayou from 1993, and you have up here, I guess my pointer doesn't work so well on the TV screen, but in the upper left, you see the Louisiana Purchase, and there are kind of two hands coming down over that map of the U.S. passing gold back and forth. And then you have a mixed race individual, kind of that big face sort of right in the middle with a young child in her lap. And she says, the young child, there's a little kind of thought bubble or voice bubble just to the right. She's saying, "Mama, why am I a quadroon when Papa was an octoroon?" And that refers back to classifications. That if one of your grandparents was white, then you were a quadroon. Am I correct on this, Anne? Anne is our specialist back there. Do I reverse if one is? Okay. Well, it refers to the idea of fractions in describing racial identity, and you'll find throughout the painting there are fractions everywhere in this painting. So he's sort of looking back at something that is about racial identity, and kind of with his very bright, very loose brushwork, there's almost sort of a sense of irony to it, and that's something that he was famous for in his work that influenced younger artists. And there was one point in his career where he adapted from sort of the canon of art history works that he would then rework. So in other words, he's kind of looking through art history and not seeing himself. So here you have on the right, Pablo Picasso's very famous Les Demoiselles d'Avignon from 1907, and Colescott has reworked it to be Les Demoiselles d'Alabama from 1985. Now this painting by Colescott is not part of the exhibition, but I put it in here to make the point that he's making about the history of art and the history of art history, and that he didn't see himself reflected, and he was going to change that. So he kind of goes through the canons of art history and reimagines them, repurposes them. In the Arkansas Art Center right now in the atrium from our own collection, we have a series of 3 drawings on view right now by Colescott that are part of this same series. So they are 3 figures that he's sort of reimagining from Picasso's famous work. And that idea is part of what Kehinde Wiley does. Kehinde Wiley would be this younger generation. And just like Colescott, he's looking through art history and not seeing himself. And so in this series in particular, he's looking at images of power, in particular military power. And so he looks at Diego Velázquez, the equestrian portrait of Count Duke Olivares, and reimagines it with a different background and a contemporary person who he finds on the street. So he'll walk through Brooklyn, he'll go to cafes, and he'll see people who he responds to in some way. He likes the way they look, or they have some kind of energy that he responds to, and he asks them if they would like to come and sit for one of his paintings. He gets a lot of no's. He gets some yeses, obviously, and more as he becomes more and more popular. Kehinde Wiley is the star of the contemporary art world right now. I mean, he's everywhere. There's a huge exhibition of his work going on in Brooklyn. And this is from 2005. And some of the things that he does is the background is very sort of rococo, very feminine. And he likes to juxtapose those very elaborate backgrounds with sort of the masculinity of the young African-American male, that image of masculinity. So he likes that contrast. And then you also have the gentleman, he's in contemporary clothes, he's in a hoodie, has a cell, you can't see it here, but he has a cell phone attached to his belt buckle. So he's kind of playing on the ideas of power and what it means to sort of take the everyman and put him in images that were reserved for the very wealthy, the very powerful. How can he's sort of creating an equation there between the two. This is a work by Leonardo Drew, Untitled number 25 from 1992. Leonardo Drew grew up in the projects near Bridgeport, Connecticut, and as a young man, he would play in a dump nearby the house. And while he was in there, he would take found objects, and he would create sculpture from what he found there. And he would often refer to it as the mouth of God, because it was about birth and it was about death. And birth being that he's recreating something. He's taking these discarded items and he's making something new out of it. They're reborn as art objects. He intentionally puts them together so that they will again disintegrate. So he intentionally rusts objects, he burns objects, and so puts them. So the idea of the cycle of life is part of his work. In this case, that idea is melded with these stacks of cotton. So when you see this, it's hard to tell from this image, but it's taller than me. I mean, it's huge. And so you're just faced with this kind of impact of what is the history of cotton in America, right? And you just are kind of faced with it. You can't get past it. It's a wall. You have to confront it. You have to deal with it. Now, all these stacks came from the garment district in New York. And so an extension of that commentary is about today, the garment industry today, and about forced labor around the world to create cheap garments. So he's playing on American history. He's playing on African American history. He's playing on the world today, in one very minimal object, right? I mean, it's stacked cotton, but yet you can't escape the multitude of meanings that are wrapped up in it. He was quite a good draftsman. As a young boy, he drew the attention of DC and Marvel Comics. They wanted him to come work for them because he was quite a good draftsman. And then as he grew older, he was introduced to the abstraction of artists like Jackson Pollock and others, and felt that that's the direction where he could make a more universal statement by working in minimalism or abstraction that he could in kind of realist representations. Another artist along that same line is David Hammons. This is his work, Esquire, or John Henry from 1990. This is a railroad girder. Are they called girders? Railroad tie. Well, not a tie, not the wooden tie, but the railroad rail. The rail with a rock on the top. And the rock is covered with real human hair that he gathers from barbershops. Now, the messaging here is he's creating a couple of different things. So there's a feeling of a human form here. And the idea of John Henry. Do all of you know the story of John Henry? Did you hear it as a child? I mean, I had forgotten it until I looked at this, and then it started to come back. And it is an African-American folk story about John Henry, who worked on the railroad, and there was some debate as to which railroad he actually worked for, but apparently someone did some research many years ago and decided that it was the Chesapeake, Ohio Railroad, but he would drive the holes to put explosive into to blow through mountains, right? So that's what he did, and he was very, very, very good at it. In fact, everyone understood him to be the best. Until a salesman came along with a steam-powered driver who said that his steam-powered driver could beat anybody in driving these holes for explosives. So a competition was set up between John Henry and the steam driver. They went. John Henry drove 2 holes each 7 feet deep, and the steam driver dug one hole 9 feet deep. So John Henry won. Everyone around him cheered and cheered so loudly that they didn't notice that he had collapsed and died on the spot from exhaustion. So in this case, David Hammons is creating a very heroic image here, of the power and the strength and how America was made on the backs of people who were doing that hard labor. He likes to use rocks a lot, and he mentions that he says that there are as many ruins in Harlem as there are in Rome. And he goes through Harlem and picks up these rocks, these ruins of Harlem that represent kind of the long history of Harlem in New York, and he turns them into sort of human-like figures by putting hair on top of them, attaching them, in this case, to the rail. Barkley Hendricks from 1978. Barkley Hendricks is really, a lot of contemporary artists, African-American artists, consider him sort of the father or grandfather. Portraitist, this is from 1978. He worked for a while in Paris. He studied with Ferdinand Léger, and he paints these life-size portraits. So this is quite large. And what he was struck by in walking around Paris was this kind of attitude that he saw, that there is so much meaning in just the stance of this black man, right? I mean, there's a presence there. And he was just struck by the presence of someone just kind of standing there really smartly dressed. He's got a cigarette in his right hand there. And there's just so much power in the minimal nature of this. There's no background. It's just the figure, and he's looking out at you, and Barkley Hendricks will often talk about the coolness of these, that this is kind of the epitome of cool. Now, this particular painting, the suit is pinstripes, and Barkley Hendricks writes at some point that after this painting, he decided not to do pinstripes for a number of years because it was so difficult and it drove him crazy, and after that, he would not do pinstripes. This is Lorna Simpson. This is Wigs Portfolio from 1994. These are lithographs on felt of a variety of wigs and hairstyles. It's as she describes it, it's the history of African American hairstyles and fashions and what they mean. The stigmas that are associated with them, the meanings that are associated with them, and there are little, again, I don't have the pointer doesn't work, but there are little phrases attached near some of them which indicate very slightly the presence of a person. So there are no bodies here, but the writings indicate the presence of a person, and you are invited to create the narrative. Create the narrative by looking at these wigs of who this person is, who they are, what their experience is, what their framework is, who are they. And they're all mounted with pins, like scientific specimens. So she's looking at this from almost kind of a historiographic viewpoint, but what it means for us to kind of fill in the blanks of who these people are based on wigs and hairstyles. Carol Walker, this is Camptown Ladies. Carol Walker works largely in a very traditional method of silhouettes, paper silhouettes. And on the right is one from I think that's from the late 18th century, early 19th century. So that's a very kind of old art form, the kind of paper cutout of the silhouette. And she uses that to make rather raw statements about sexuality, about position, societal hierarchies, slavery, and so on. So this piece by Carol Walker, Camptown Ladies, is over 60 feet long. So one of the things that was a challenge for us in bringing the exhibition here was the sheer scale of most of these works. So for example, there was another work by Carrie James Marshall, which is incredible, but it was 70 feet long, I want to say, something like that. So we could have one or the other, because we only have one wall that's that long, uninterrupted. So we could have one or the other of those works, and we chose the Carol Walker. You may know her name because she recently caused a great sensation in New York with her work, A Subtlety or the Marvelous Sugar Baby, which she created this sculpture at the Domino Sugar Factory in Brooklyn before it was torn down. And so she created this sculpture out of sugar, and the face has sort of she's focusing on sort of the mammy type with the headscarf. It's a sphinx type of figure. She's commenting on the history of the sugar industry and how it gained prominence and wealth. The little figures in the front are made out of, molded out of brown sugar and molasses. It's huge. I mean, it's enormous. And it is amazing. Well, it was amazing. I mean, it's not there anymore. But so she really has a knack for just kind of hitting on the meaning, hitting on the point with not a lot of extraneous material. I mean, you get it. You know, you walk in, you see it, you get it. Nick Cave. Nick Cave is another young-ish artist working today who's extremely popular. He's having shows everywhere. His gallery is having shows all the time. And he creates sound suits. He's doing some other things now, but he's most known for these things that are called sound suits. He was a dancer with Alvin Ailey, and decided to move into creating these sculptures that are wearable. And they do a couple of things. Number one, they make the wearer anonymous, so it strips away identity. You know, you don't know who's under there. It's a mishmash of things. So each, I don't know, I think later I have a detail of one of these. But it's crochet, it's buttons, it's sequins that create the suit underneath. And then the intention is that with many of them, you wear them, and as you move, they make sound. And I just included this slide in the lower right to see kind of how they would move about and how they're activated. So there are videos, if you're interested, there are videos of Nick Cave and other dancers performing in these sound suits. Glenn Ligon. This is, we have quite a few works by him in the exhibition. This is his Neon America from 2008, which we've used that image quite a bit for the exhibition. There are always some surprises when an exhibition shows up. The surprise for this was, and this is quite large, is that we've seen pictures of it, and so we see it lit up like this. In reality, it flashes. So, initially the thinking was it's broken. But luckily, all exhibitions come with a courier or registrar or someone from the home institution, and in fact, he made us aware that no, it is supposed to do that. And here, by the way he does this, quite subtly, it looks like America is what's lit up, but in fact, America, the word America is actually black with the light behind it. So he's created through neon a black America. And the fact that it flashes, he's making a commentary on the fact that sort of that promised land of America is not quite there. It's not all the way on for everyone. And so it's sometimes there and sometimes not. It's a flickering thing. This is Hank Willis Thomas. He is a photographer, among other things, and he is our opening night speaker tonight. A lot of his photographs comment on marketing and how companies market to the African American community and how they portray the African American community in marketing. So here you have on the left the Nike swoosh in the head there. That is Photoshop. That's not actually kind of in there, but that's Photoshop. And on the right is sort of the ball and chain of the basketball of that sort of trope about the African American community. So he's they're what you're going to find in this exhibition is that the themes and the messages are raw and they're inescapable. You look at it and you get it, you understand it. And I say that you understand it, but everyone will understand it differently because everyone comes to the exhibition with a different framework, their own experiences. And they'll look at these works and have reactions that are sometimes provocative. And that's the intention of the Rubells. I mean, they will tell you that they intentionally collect provocative work. This is another work by Hank Willis Thomas in the show called Priceless. So here he's looking at the famous MasterCard ad, and I don't think, you can't read that, and I'm going to try to read it. What does it say at the top? I can't even read it now. I wish I had my thing here. Oh, three-piece suit, $250. New socks, $2. 9mm pistol, $40 or $60. Gold chain, $400. Bullet, 60 cents. Picking the perfect casket for your son, priceless. And he's commenting here on his cousin, who was shot for a necklace that was eventually kind of sold for $400. And so he's saying, his life was worth $400 to the person who shot him. And this is a photograph that he took at the funeral of his family. And also the comment on, picking the perfect casket for your son, priceless, that there is even in this terrible time, there's a feeling of pressure from marketing that the price or the kind of coffin that you select, from the very inexpensive to the very expensive, you're almost trained, or you feel guilty if you choose the cheaper one. I didn't love them enough if I choose the cheaper one. I have to choose the most expensive one. So he's just commenting on how we're marketed to and how we're portrayed in society through marketing and PR. This is Wangechi Mutu. And this just says, "No, I regret nothing," from 2007. This is collage and paint and all kinds of mixed media, and there's actually a figure there. So the bit on the right is a leg in sort of a high-heeled shoe that goes up to aspects of a female form. And she particularly focuses on the female form and its link to nature, its link to objectification. So some of the imagery is taken from fashion magazines or pornography or a number of different source materials that she then puts together into these large and beautiful works. This is a video, which, since we're short on time, I'm going to go past. Okay, so how did the exhibition come to Little Rock? Do any of you know Darrell Walker, basketball player? Yeah. So Darrell Walker is a wonderful collector. Many of the artists in this exhibition are in his own collection. And I was talking to him on the phone one day, and he said, do you know the Rubells? And I said, no, I don't know them, but I know of them. And he said, well, they have this exhibition called 30 Americans, which is going around, and I think it'd be great in Little Rock. I said, well, I think you're probably right. So let's look into it and see what the cost is and see if it's still circulating, if we can get on the docket as a venue. And so we did our research and we're able to bring it here. And I'm so thankful to him for making me aware of them and of the exhibition. And that's his card, and I actually did have to ask him, because it doesn't look like him, that card in the middle. So I said, was there another Darrell Walker? I mean, were you the leading rebounding guard in the NBA? And he's like, yeah, that sounds about right. I said, okay, then that is your card. It just didn't look like you. This is Kehinde Wiley, and one of the works that is in the Rubell collection, but not in the exhibition. And the reason why is, number one, you can see how huge it is, right? The thing is enormous. And it went to the first 2 venues, I think, for the exhibition, either the first 1 or 2. And the way that they're able to transport it is they take it off the stretcher and roll it up, transport it, re-stretch it, and put it on the wall. So obviously you can't do that. I mean, the danger to the work was too great for them to keep doing it, so it didn't travel after the first few, but it's so gorgeous and so wonderful. I mean, I so wish it could have been here. But this is sort of how it comes here. It comes here in a truck. This is sort of installation photos, how it happens. Laying it out, there's a lot of pointing that goes on. We look at, we lay out a floor plan and we put pictures down, and then we point. And when the pieces eventually do come, it's never quite what you expect. There are always surprises, and there's always some shifting that needs to happen. And then you set them around. These are some installation shots kind of in process. So eventually they'll be hung. So first you set them out and just make sure the spacing is right and that the relations are what you want from one work to the next. Here are 2 of those Nick Cave sound suits. Every exhibition, there is, as a work gets uncrated or unpacked, there's an inspection process. So this is the registrar from the Rubell Collection who's examining the work. This is a self-portrait by Basquiat, which is in the exhibition. This is the installation of one of the sound suits. So it's first, you can see in the lower left, it is an actual kind of full suit of macrame and knitting and all kinds of material, and then the kind of overlay, and that is all metal and quite heavy, is put on top. This is for the large Kehinde Wiley. The way that was shipped was the painting was separate from the frame. And the frame has a couple of interesting elements. So at the very top, you can see in the upper right, is a face carved into the top of the frame. And in the corners, it's hard to see there, but there's a crown at the very edge. And in the middle are eggs and sperm. There are little sperms in there, and there are little white sperms all throughout the painting. So our head of education has called the studio, because we didn't realize that until it came here and we saw it. And she said, you have to tell us what the sperm means. And they haven't gotten back to us yet, but they did kind of laugh. So there's got to be a story. And as soon as we find out what that is, we will let you all know. But that was another of the surprises, and we're like, those are sperm. So what does that mean? So here's the installation of the frame. There's the painting in the crate. So the painting gets put in the frame at the back and then turned or flipped around and then hung. It's heavy, very heavy. Not as heavy as some of the Kenwood House paintings. Those were massive. And then that's the registrar from the Rubell Collection. So again, another part of his job is to make sure everything's installed properly, lit properly, and so on. That is the Carol Walker, the large Carol Walker piece. That's a huge template. It's difficult to see there, but it came with a large template to show how it gets laid out, and here it is. So all the individual cut paper pieces then get applied. And then lighting begins. We have one person who is brave enough to go up 40 feet on the scissor lift and do the lighting. And these are just a couple of shots of the exhibition. You get a sense of the scale. That's the America. So again, in this, you're not seeing the flickering, but believe me, it does. And that had to be installed by, that actually, I think I ended it. That was installed by a sign company, so we had to have them come in and actually install that for us as part of the contract. So that's basically the exhibition, and that's the preview of the exhibition, and I hope that you'll come to hear the lecture tonight. If you're a member, it's free. If you're not a member, it's... Oh, it is free for everybody tonight. Oh, well, there you go. Okay, so free tonight for everyone, opens to the public tomorrow. Tell your friends. I'm so happy it's here. It's just such a wonderful exhibition. We have the catalog. You have this on your table. Take it, and it will show you all of the programs that we have coming up. We actually have the Rubells will be coming on May 7th and discussing how they put their collection together and how they came up with the exhibition. So put that on your calendar as well. I have a few minutes for questions, don't I?
Let's thank Todd. Joanne has a question, and Bob G's going to give you the microphone, Joanne. Hold on just a minute.
Why do you think they are all so large?
That's a good question. And some of the artists tend to work on a large scale. It could be that the Rubells are drawn to larger, impactful works. I will say for us, one of the things that I liked about the exhibition was the scale of the work, that you can't escape the message. It's in your field of vision, right? It's not like a small thing where you can kind of look away and rest. It's there, and you have to confront it. But that's not true for all of them. There are some that are small, but most of them are large. Yeah.
Hold on just a minute here. Wait just a minute. Raise your hand, please, and Patrick, you got a question.
The public never gets to see the installation process. I was fascinated by your shots of it. How long did it take to uncrate and install this exhibit? And do you have your own installation crew?
We do have our own installation crew that do not only all of our traveling exhibitions, but all of our permanent collection installations as well. And in terms of how long it takes, Anne's here, but I don't know if she... Are they done?
I think they're pretty darn close.
Okay, so we're close.
I'm not sure if this includes all the uncrating, but it's at least 2 weeks going on the wall in this case.
Yeah.
It's not always that long, but for something of this scale, and we're talking about essentially 4 people plus the visiting person, and one of those people is the curator, Brian Lang.
Yeah. I mean, part of the time is taken with the uncrating and inspecting each work, which is long and laborious, because especially on a scale this size, because you're trying to look at every square inch and make sure that nothing has happened in transit, that no damage has occurred. So that usually takes quite some time to make sure that they're all okay.
Maybe you have a question right here. Wait for the microphones coming at you.
That was my question.
Okay.
The question exactly. It was answered well. Thank you.
Okay, you have a question right back here.
So the selection of your artworks, is it more based on the skills of the artist, or is it more of based on the meaning that it comes out of this ritual?
I think in terms of the Rubells, when they selected the work for their collection, that's something that you can save that question for when they're here on May 7th and ask them what draws them to each of the work. For us, we had this catalog to go by, which has 200 works, and they're always buying, so it's that the list is getting longer all the time. So we had to go through and make selections from here for what we were going to bring to Arkansas. And part of that selection process had to do with the quality of the work, the message of the work. Obviously, we had to have 30 artists represented, because it's called 30 Americans. So we couldn't skew to one artist that we liked a lot and not bring something by somebody else. And then also, cost plays a factor. It's unfortunate, but it does. And the way that it played a factor here is that some of these works already had crates because they had been at other venues, at other museums, and some didn't. So if it already has a crate, crates are like, for some of these works, $5,000, $6,000 a piece. And if you're talking about, 40 works, that ratchets up the price in a hurry. So we looked at which ones already had crates and then went from there to see kind of if we'd prefer to have another one than the one that already had traveled around. So in fact, there's one work in the exhibition that's never been shown anywhere. And when the registrar was here and we opened it up, he said, "Oh, so that's what it looks like." I haven't even seen it because it's never been shown. It hasn't been shown at the Rubell Museum, and it hasn't been shown at any of the other venues.
Sybil.
Have you done anything to intentionally engage students and teachers in schools so that you will have, could you tell us about that?
We have been talking with different schools, and actually I wish that our head of education was here because she's really been spearheading that effort. Now this isn't related to schools per se, but one of the lectures that you'll see here is going to be at the Mosaic Templars. So we collaborated with them because we wanted to sort of share audiences. And since I've been here, I've been very concerned with collaborations with other organizations in town. So we collaborated with them, and we have been working with schools and reaching out to their principals and getting them involved. It's always difficult when it involves buses. That always puts a wrinkle in everything. But I'm hoping we'll have great success in getting school groups here.
Oh, we have a question. Kelly, you have the right to ask a question at your alma mater.
We were trying to introduce ourselves as Clinton School, Class 7, proud alum. To Sybil's question about schools and collaborations too, I want to say I'm very excited that we're bringing Keith Jackson's Park kids over one evening, and they couldn't come during our business hours, so we are opening for them and hiring security just so they can come in and have a private experience with the art. I'm excited about that. My question though, you mentioned the cost of some crates, but the audience might appreciate knowing just how expensive this exhibition is for the Art Center, and I'm selfishly wanting them to hear that number so they'll want to pony up.
She was trained well by Dr. Bruce.
Thank you for asking that question, Kelly. The exhibition, the fee to take the exhibition was $50,000, and then there's shipping and crating on top of that. So that made us really look at the crating very closely to make sure that we didn't skyrocket that number too far. So all in, we're probably around 70 for the exhibition. Yeah, I mean, there are other things like additional security that's required by the owners. There's the painting of the galleries. There's the production of all of the labels and the text panels and all of that stuff. Right. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you, Kelly prompted a lot of good comments from the arts. That's good. Dr. Bruce, let Bob get the microphone to you.
There was a wonderful documentary about the National Gallery in London here just recently, and one of the nice things about it was about other art forms that were there as you looked around some of the wonderful paintings. Have you thought about music as a part of this? And I'd be interested in what kinds of music you might play for some of these, or ballet, or poetry, or other art forms.
Well, we do have, and you'll see it in here, is we do have a collaboration with poets. I think it's the Southern Fried Poetry Slam will be here. I don't even know what the date is. June 2nd, thank you. And that, in that case, the poets will be looking at the work in the exhibition and using it as a stepping off point for poetry. And that's something we've done. Our ekphrastic poetry slam we've been doing now for, well, since I've been here, so 4 years, using artwork as the catalyst for poetry. Music is something I am always wanting to incorporate because music is so integral. And in fact, Robert Colescott, the first artist I showed you up there with the brightly colored work, both of his parents were musicians and he was actually a drummer as a young man. And I think when you see kind of how densely packed his work is, you get a sense of sort of a cacophony of sound through kind of color and density of color in the paintings. But in terms of this exhibition, I don't think we have music integrated into it. With what? Oh, the museum hack events. And that's also on here, and that will happen through the art school. So there's art making, and there is music involved in that. Yeah.
We've got time for one more question. Here it is.
Yes, sir. I wondered which artwork had not been shown before.
Which what?
Which artwork had not been shown before?
It is, well, here, I'll show it to you. It is a work by, now I can't remember the artist. It is, I'll show it to you in 1 second. And while I'm looking for it, I will tell you that the exhibition includes video, sculpture, painting, prints, photography. It's a really wide array of work. You mean the connection to our own collection? Oh, yes. So 2 things. One is that the outside of the entrance to the exhibition, we have a large chalkboard that we're inviting people to make comments, to write their comments on the chalkboard. There's also a place for you to make and record a video. So we're saying 30 seconds on 30 Americans, so tell us what your reactions are, what you saw, what you thought. And then we're going to put them on a loop on a video screen in the same area to play them back. The other thing is something that we're calling Collection Connection, which is a label that will appear on some of the works in the 30 Americans exhibition that will say Collection Connection, and it will connect to works in our own collection in the permanent galleries. So certain themes, like themes of irony or themes of racial unrest, will be connected to works in our own collection. You know what?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that we've hung quite a number of things from the permanent collection that are both African American works and a lot of works with art as activism. Very strong, both of those very strong themes in our collection. And in fact, what we have out is barely scraping the surface of the African American collection. We really, really have a very strong one and hope to keep building it.
And I know why I can't find it in here. It's because they bought it too recently, and it's not in the catalog.
Have to go to the exhibit and see it. Let's give Todd a round of applause.